Hey, welcome to Uncle Joe's RV Park. Today's guest I have is Peter Thornley. He happens to be a chaplain and has a great interest in biblical archaeology. Thank you for being here, Peter.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Thank you much. So tell us about that interest, because I'm sure that is a great interest. I met with you a couple times when we talked about that. So go ahead, please.
Well, it always thrills me to see evidence that proves the Bible to be true, and a lot of other people like to see it too, so I'm really into digging it up and showing it off.
Great. And what's today's topic, please?
Well, today's topic is the Shroud of Turin, about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, consistent with the Easter.
Okay. And this is known as the Shroud of Turin, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And why does the shroud arouse so much interest?
Well, the reason why is because it continuously baffles people about how it has properties that nobody could ever have expected it to have. Like, for example, it being a photographic negative, it being a three-dimensional image. In microscopic studies, they see one fibril that's dark, and right next to it one that's uncolored. And so essentially they are fascinated. The original STIRP team, Shroud of Turin Research Project team, did over 250,000 hours of study on the shroud, and they are even more fascinated with it now than they had been in the past. This, the photo that was just shown was the positive-negative image of the shroud when Secondo Pia first photographed the shroud, May 28, 1898. He saw the negative image on the shroud for the first time as he pulled the glass developing plate out of the developing solution. He was startled to see the face of Jesus looking at him. The shroud is a negative with lights and darks reversed, because a forger wouldn't know that, because photography would not be invented until 1840. They realized this wasn't a fake, and this started the study of the shroud. And you'll notice the puncture wounds on the scalp and forehead, which go up on top of the head as well. And this, okay, we're a little ahead of us on that photo here.
Okay, they went back. Go ahead.
Notice the puncture wounds on the scalp and forehead go on top of the head as well. This indicates the crown of thorns was a cap, not a wreath-type crown. Also, a piece of his beard was pulled out, thus fulfilling Isaiah 56, I offered my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. And the facial beating Jesus took caused his right eye to be swollen shut and his nose broken. When STIRP team member Don Mills asked if he had any overwhelming feelings from testing the shroud, he replied, "I didn't. But the one thing that stood out was here was a body terribly beaten, and the face was totally at peace, and the two just don't go together."
Right. Excellent. And so that was kind of like one aspect about the shroud. Mm-hmm. Were there any other aspects about the shroud besides the negative?
Well, the other cloth, the Sudarian, which is mentioned in John chapter 20, verse 7, is the face cloth, and this has been bringing proof to the shroud. And this was wrapped around the head of Jesus to respectfully cover his face as he hung on the cross. And it was removed from his head before his body was interred so that they could treat his body. And the Sudarian also has type AB positive blood, the same as the shroud. And after 25,000 hours of study, they determined this covered the face of a man that died in an upright position with his head leaning against his right arm. He died of asphyxiation. He was completely dead. The cloth was wrapped around his head, knotted at the top, pinned to the back of his blood-caked hair, and then it was pulled off of his head and left wadded up or rolled up on the shelf of the tomb, consistent with Jewish burial practices. The stains on the Sudarian, the word Sudarian means sweat towel, and that's the exact word that's used in John 20, verse 7. are 1 part blood, 5 parts plural edema fluid, consistent with respiratory failure. The blood and the staining patterns on the Sudarian match the shroud and prove that they came from the same body.
Okay. And that was the image that we just saw. Okay,
Yes.
great. So what does the next slide contain?
Well, that's the frontal view of the shroud image, and that's the photographic negative, which is the positive of the shroud image here. Now, in this, you can see that the wounds were in the wrists, not the palms of the hands. Of course, the Greek word for hand in the Bible includes the wrist, so that is not a misprint. But we know that the palms of the hands would not support the body weight during crucifixion, so he was nailed through the wrists instead. And when a nail goes through the wrist, it presses on the median nerve, which retracts the thumbs, which is why you don't see thumbs on the hand image. And also it distended the index fingers, which is why the index fingers are longer. The right arm is dislocated, which fulfills Psalm 22:14, my bones are out of joint, and there's a cut on the right kneecap consistent with a fall. The blood runs off the arms in a direction away from the wrists, indicating his arms were elevated. His abdomen is distended, indicating asphyxiation, the cause of death in crucifixion, and there's a spear wound on the right side consistent with the size of the Roman lance.
Okay.
And so this gives you an idea of the wounds of Jesus.
Okay. And what's this? What was that last image?
Well, that was a greater description of the wounds of Jesus as he was crucified.
Okay.
What we had gone over.
Oh, what you just specifies what you already said. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does our next clip going to show?
The next photo is that of the dorsal image, or the back of Jesus. And on that, you'll notice there's 117 scourge marks, which indicates 39 lashes from a 3-stranded flagrum. The Roman whip was called the flagrum. And of course, that fulfills a lot of the scripture. By his stripes we were healed. I gave my back to those who beat it. The plowers plowed upon my back. They made deep their furrows. Anyway, the direction of the scourge marks indicates that Jesus was rendered unconscious while he was being whipped at the 27th blow. And also on the heel, you see there's a large concentration of blood. And this, of course, fulfills Genesis 3:15. The serpent shall bruise his heel. And also on the left shoulder, you can see there's a flat area, which is believed that either when he fell under the weight of the cross beam or when he was rubbing on the cross beam while he was being crucified, that made that mark. And the position of the legs indicates that rigor mortis had set in.
Okay. Okay. And just to keep on with the flow of his, what would the next image we're going to be looking at?
The next image was found when John Jackson, who worked at JPL, he inserted the photo of the Shroud of Turin in the VP8 image analyzer. And the VP8 image analyzer was made to detect the surfaces of planets or moons in outer space. And so what they found was that the shroud image was 3-dimensional. And no other photograph had proven to be 3-dimensional before. Another thing is that the image of the shroud only penetrates 0.005 of an inch deep into the cloth. And so there is no known way to put that kind of an image on a cloth, even with today's technology. And so this is why they realized that the shroud had extraordinary properties, and this is why they pressured the Turin Church to allow them to study the shroud.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. So what would your next image would be talking about?
Next image is the close-up of the blood on the shroud. They were doubtful that it was real blood because it was a bright red color rather than a dark red color. But what had happened was, as they tested it, they found that there were elevated levels of bilirubin, which was secreted into the blood. When a body goes into shock, the liver secretes bilirubin into the blood, and after it dries, the bilirubin preserves the bright red color of the blood. And so the blood was real blood. It was type AB positive, which is common to the Middle East, but not to Europe, proving again that the shroud was not made in Europe. And it had XX chromosomes, proving no male influence, and that Jesus was born of a virgin.
So just to reiterate that last part, because I guess everybody gets an XY because you have a father and a mother.
Mm-hmm.
On this one, it's just both XX.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I find it very interesting.
That's why.
Well, and I know when we met earlier, you were saying there was one of the people who were testing it, but he saw that it was an XX. I don't know if you have that in your notes.
Yes, that was Vern Miller, who was studying the blood on the shroud, and when he found out it was real human blood from the Middle East and that it was born of a virgin blood, he said, "Oh God, you really did do this. This is no hoax." And he came to know the Lord right then.
Okay. Do you have any more slides for us?
Oh, yes, we do.
Okay, go ahead.
Next one is the false-colored image on the shroud. This is a backlit, false-colored image of the shroud. And this shows on the left side of the photograph the separation of the blood plasma from the blood serum. Now, we know in John chapter 19, verse 34, that when they thrust the spear into his side, it's believed that Longinus was the soldier that did that, blood and water came out of his side. We believe that this is what they saw, was the separation of the blood plasma from the blood serum.
Okay, I think we're coming out to where we going to have to cut it off right here. I'd like to have you come back another time.
Oh, I'd love to
Continue on. Hi, welcome to this session of Uncle Joe's RV Park, and my guests here today are from the local SEIU. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Certainly, George. Thanks for having us here today. My name is David Raco, and I am the president of SCIU 503 Sublocal 84 that represents approximately 200 classified staff at Southern Oregon University.
And I'm Barbara Henson. I am the vice president of the Sublocal 84, serving here with David for our classified staff.
Excellent. How about tell us about what you talked about what the union is, but tell us a little bit more about who you belong to, this union. Like you say reps over 72,000 public workers in Oregon, right? Okay. Oh, you already said that. Okay, sorry. So what's the situation right now in higher education?
Well, currently we're in the midst of bargaining our contract with the public universities, and we're also working with the universities along with students and faculty to beseech the legislature to find revenue in order to fund higher ed. The governor's recommended budget for higher ed this year actually falls $120 million short of what we would need to even remain at current service level. And so we want to send a message loud and clear to our government that higher ed desperately needs more funding.
Part of the revenue issues has to do with how the state is collecting revenue. And so currently 80% of state revenue is coming from personal income taxes paid by average workers like us. And only 4% is coming out of corporate income taxes. And so what we would like to see, rather than all of these different state agencies fighting over pieces of the pie, that we are asking and hoping that the governor will increase that pie. And a great way to do that is through having corporations pay a fair share in contributing to our state revenue. So if people like us are contributing around $19 billion a year, and corporations are only contributing around $1 billion. And the lottery brings in more funds to the revenue than that. So we would like to see it become more equitable.
I could concur. Okay. So in this process, so I'm going to ask. So what is you and what the union's going to hope for, in a sense of like, let's talk about like how can maybe local people help and stuff like that for our legislator, let the legislator know what we're doing or how we can increase the pie, or how can a local person support this measure and so forth.
The number one thing that a local person can do right now is to call their senators and urge them to support the Student Success Act that will be going to the Senate. It's already passed the House. And what this bill will do is it will raise $2 billion to fund the kindergarten through 12th grade system by instituting a very responsible tax on commercial activity. So the way it works is that for all commercial activity over $1 million, it's a $250 tax plus 0.57% of that commercial activity over $1 million. And that'll help fund K through 12, which is important. That system has really been struggling. And on the higher ed side, it frees up some money in the state budget that could help our situation. And then it also prepares those K through 12 students for university when they do get there.
Mm-hmm. And so that's the Revenue Bill HB 3427. Is that
That's
correct?
right. Also known as the Student Success Act.
Okay.
A little bit easier to remember.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in case the people call up and go, I don't know, what's the number of that bill? so we'll want to maybe they say, well, it's HB 3427, don't you know? And so, great. And let's see. So the union itself, are you allowed to talk about what we're asking for right now? Because this is the year for negotiating contracts. I know, everything's getting bargaining and stuff like that, but what's public knowledge in the sense of what the union is asking for itself?
Yeah, well, 503 recently posted on their website, so it is available what our bargaining team is proposing.
Okay.
We're looking to get fair cost of living adjustments. We have fallen rather behind as classified staff in terms of total compensation. We're also looking for more respect in the workplace and a little more flexibility around working schedules. We're a very democratically run union. Every year before we enter bargaining, we survey our members to find out what it is that they want, and that's what our bargaining team acts upon. So this year, it's to catch up with those cost of living adjustments,
Right.
to get more flexibility in the workplace, and to get the respect that we deserve from administration.
Right. I can understand that in the sense of because can we get it, for instance, about respect? Is there like an example that you may be able to give without, getting too personal?
Well, what we see pretty frequently in our role as leaders in our union and also as stewards, is we see a lot of members being asked to do really more than one person's share of work in an effort to perhaps slim down budgets. The universities are leaving vacancies open, they're not filling positions, and they're finding ways to have the average employee do a little bit extra, which creates a very toxic work environment over time when somebody feels like they've been given more work than they can possibly keep up with, and that there's no acknowledgement that that's an above and beyond service. So that's, I think for me personally, the biggest area where we definitely need more respect.
I think I've heard that a lot of people are asked to be, they could do the work, but because that's in a different higher classification, they'll do the work, but they don't get paid to do that work. and so
That's correct.
and so that yes, that the feeling of resentment of, hey, how come I'm doing all the work like you said, and not getting anything for it.
And currently at the bargaining table, administration has proposed some changes to our contract language that would actually strip us of our ability to even challenge them on those reclassification issues. So that's one area where we plan to push back.
If I may, I believe so. The thing is because I've heard of this, is a supervisor will give a review, and the review will say da 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 da, which makes the employee sound like I'm not doing my job, and we get you can write the rebuttal, which gets attached. It doesn't change the wording of the review itself, but there is a rebuttal saying, hey, at this time you had me also doing da 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 da. That's why this might not have happened. Now, and then as you said, that language change means that you can't even put in that rebuttal just to say, hey,
That's correct.
So
we're hoping that they will drop that proposed change to our contract.
I think that it's also important to remember who our classified staff are and how important our work is to making the universities run. So we have the people who are scheduling the classes, doing all the support for the faculty to make sure faculty can focus on their students. We pay the bills and clean the buildings and keep the grounds and create a safe environment for the students. It includes our campus security and it's a lot of people doing the frontline work with students, a lot of hard workers, and that is what our union is comprised of. And I feel it's also important for people to remember that a union is not some separate kind of entity that is some mysterious group doing things. It is the actual members is what makes up a union, and the members are deciding how that union runs.
Right.
So it is very democratic. It's a great example of democracy in action.
And I also think it's just the economic potential or unpotential, or what could happen if the union employee goes out, they buy groceries, they pay the rents. Mm-hmm. They're a part of the economy, and if they don't get much money, or keep on losing workers, the economy surrounding this university and other universities goes down too. It gets rougher for everybody, not just for the union worker. It gets rougher for anybody surrounding businesses and stuff like that also.
Yes.
One impact follows another impact. It's like a domino effect. One starts falling, so does the other. So,
Yeah.
good. Barbara, you have something that you were going to relate something about the revenue and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had already touched on that, really. Just how the state revenue is brought together.
Okay.
And so much of it is on the backs of the working class. And so having it become more equitable, even when you're looking at property taxes, how much that has changed since the 80s, where the average household of property taxes, when you look at property tax as a whole, average households were at 42% and businesses were at 50%. And that has completely flopped, where now it's the average household is contributing 52% to that, and businesses are only contributing around 40%. And so as all these tax breaks are going through for corporations, there's not the same kind of relief for your average household. And it makes things very inequitable. It makes our economy worse. People who are going to the stores and buying the things that they need just to survive and paying rent and mortgages and all of that, that's what makes our economy strong. And as we're seeing that falling away, we're looking at it becoming even more difficult to support things like education. And that is just so critical to the future of Oregon. It's why 40% of the budget is focused towards education. But we have to make sure that the funding stays in place and goes back to more like it was. In the 90s, education received somewhere around 54%, and it's dropped to 24% for funding of higher education, is what I'm speaking to there. And it's not sustainable. And what that causes is a shift onto the students' back. And we already know that tuition is just getting out of hand, student debt is astronomical, and that's not a way to prepare for the future and to think that we're going somehow our economy is going to keep going great. It's not a pretty picture when you really look at that.
Oh, well, and this kind of reminds me of past history. They used to complain that there was the credit card balloon that they were waiting for the person because they said, oh, this debt, Then there was the housing bubble that, was expandable. Now it's the student debt that's the big bubble that they're hoping that's not going to burst too. And that has a special effect. Like you're saying, the students come out with debts that are